Well, welcome back. We're going to be talking about a big topic, so we'll probably have many of these videos on this, but that is communication.
So this is video number one, communication.
That's right. And Ron and I are both psychotherapists. We have been working for 20 plus years with lots of couples and families. And when a couple comes in to treatment the first time, and I ask them, what do you think your biggest issue is? 99% of the time, they'll say communication.
Yeah, it's very, very common.
We can't communicate. And so then I will ask let's say it's a heterosexual couple, so I'll ask the male spouse, tell me what you think your wife's upset about. And he'll go on and tell me, and I'll ask her, is that correct? Yeah, that's pretty close. Okay, you tell me what he's upset about. And she'll tell me, and I'll ask him, is that correct? Yes. So apparently you don't have a problem communication, but you don't like what you are hearing from each other. That's a different issue.
David Snarch, an author that we have referred people to, is fond of saying communication is no virtue if you can't tolerate the message.
Yes.
And
yeah, so we don't like what we're
true.
hearing. Maybe we don't like how it's being said. I understand all that. It's not that we don't discuss that topic, but it's really different than having skills that will magically resolve this issue you're having with your spouse or several issues. And an example I will give is the fact that we can have much better communication at work. We can have people we don't really care for. We work with them. We can have exchanges that are difficult, but we manage them much more effectively as a whole, especially if we're continuing to work in a place, than in our personal relationships, particularly our significant ones with our children and our spouse, even more so. So why is that the case? And really, it's the way your brain is functioning at work is different than the way it functions at home, especially when you're talking with your spouse about a very emotionally charged issue. And that is because your brain is mainly composed of the emotional fight, flight, or freeze system called the limbic system. And then the little part of the brain, if you imagine an ice cream sundae with a cherry on top, the cherry is your thinking. It's the frontal lobe. It's small. And so as soon as you feel threatened, even though you're not being physically threatened, but there's this fear is arising, then your frontal lobe, or the part that thinks, starts to become compromised to the point where we've all had pointless arguments where we can't even remember what we said or what we were even arguing about. And that's because there was no information going into that part of the brain that creates memories and is actually functioning. And so what we want to do when we're talking about communication is learn some skills to keep that from getting so escalated. And that's really quite a trick, because there's something about our brains that doesn't want to de-escalate.
So you're suggesting that a good chunk of communication is self-management.
Yes, and it really gets down to being aware when you're starting the process of escalation. You feel your stomach tighten, you're feeling the sense of dread. That's letting you know that your brain is starting to shut down. For some people, they become much more aggressive in their communication, more in the fight mode. Others, their brain goes offline. I have a client who, was aware of that recently, where he just said, I don't even remember what we said in this session. And so that lets me know that his his spouse tends to be much more verbally, fluent, and he gets so anxious, and not having been aware of it prior to that, that his brain really wasn't even processing what she was saying. So you're right, it's about self-management. In his case, it's trying to get more awareness earlier when his brain is shutting down and letting her know that, hey, I want to hear you, but I'm just aware that the last few things you just said I didn't take in.
Part of communication, we will talk about relationship patterns. One is a pursuer-distancer pattern. Distancers can always outdistance. They always have one more distancing trick in their bag of tricks than a pursuer has. And so it becomes a challenge. And a distancer who wants to change that can, as it were, put on their lead boots, like the old undersea divers had to put on. Thinking of having those on dry land is a good metaphor for staying put when you would normally run out of the room, whether actually or just figuratively. Being able to stay put, to monitor your own breathing, to observe the morphing. If you're with somebody who is upset, their face looks considerably different than when they are calm. And watching the face morph from calm to upset is an interesting, if you can regulate yourself, you can see it. And that's an opportunity to say, wow, maybe I've done a little better job. I didn't hear what they said, but I saw how they were saying it differently than I ever did before.
Yeah, so some of this is going to be you're tracking what happens to you. It's very easy for us to see what happens to our spouse. And we certainly spend an inordinate amount of time trying to get our spouse to quit doing whatever it is they do. And this is where I think we get these impasses. And a lot of people, I think, do think that good communication skills means I will be able to convince you to do things the way I would like them to do.
Wouldn't that be swell?
And I have had that experience with couples where I will come up with a strategy for change. One person, maybe I'm only seeing one person in the coupleship, and we'll make some strategy. Okay, so this week when this happens, what are some things you can do differently, and we'll come up with that. And a lot of times the next time I see that person in treatment, they will say something like, well, I did what you said to do and it didn't work. And well, how are you defining it didn't work? Well, he still yelled at me, or he still refused to talk to me. So in that instance, the goal wasn't really to communicate, it was to manipulate.
Right. And therapists really aren't trained to assist you with that.
Right.
In fact, it goes against our ethical codes.
Yes.
So we're not here to manipulate, to help you make somebody change without them knowing that you're doing it. This is about seeing an interaction, saying, how would I be the best self I would be, regardless of whether somebody deserves it or not. I'm going to improve myself in the world. I'm in this relationship, so this is where I start.
Right. Yeah. So what are we talking about fundamentally? We're talking about, first of all, settling your brain down, which is a whole nother topic in and of itself, how to do that. And then we're talking about two things that I really define listening. One is communication, which is listening, like really listening, not fake listening where you're just waiting for your turn to make a point. And then curiosity. There is a wonderful book I highly recommend called The Lost Art of Listening by Michael Nichols. It will change the way you think about communication forever. It's a good read. He's an excellent author. But what his main point is that most of us are so busy trying to get the other person to understand us that nobody's understanding each other. You can get two people both talking waiting their turn maybe. But neither of them is taking the time to say, I'm going to set aside my agenda right now and just listen to this person, try to understand their point of view. I may never agree with it, but can I understand it? Can I let them know? What I hear you saying is, or wow, it sounds like that was really painful for you when I told you you were a complete jerk. And that is a tough thing to do, because it seems to go against, it seems to go against our natural response in some way. That we want to make a point. We don't want them to get away with something. I hear a lot of times clients will say, he needs to learn about their spouse. They need to learn. And there's all this focus on teaching people how to respond differently. And my response is actually, no, you need to learn how to do a better job of holding on to yourself, taking a position, not getting off your position. And in any case, listening is really more about that.
One thing that is important is listening to your own words, and some of that may be when you say this is intolerable, but then it continues on. So saying it's intolerable is a lie. Saying it's almost intolerable would be accurate. And that maybe seem like a slight difference, but I think it's important to say what's real and when would it be intolerable.
To be more factual rather than I can't stand this. It's I don't want to. Put up
this
with
is painful for me.
I don't like
would
it.
Be accurate.
I can stand it, but I'm not going to anymore. The other thing we highly recommend, and this again kind of ties into the first point, which is your brain available? Is your frontal lobe available? And that is, can you be curious about that other person's thinking? Most of the time we're not. I mean, if we're honest, I'm not curious about Ron's thinking. I just want to make a point. And yet that's not my best day when I'm in that position. When I'm not understanding his perspective, his behaviors, if I can get curious and just ask a real question, not what the heck do you think you're doing, which is not a real question.
Right. And if what I want is my wife to desire me, and I know that she's not paying attention, she's really not curious, and I throw a tantrum, I don't know that that's going to be the most compelling way to get her. Yeah, it's like, So I can work against myself by just giving in to an impulse. That it can mirror something from my past rather than, and that could inform me I have more work to do than I thought I did over this wound that just sits there.
Absolutely.
And, it's our partners who can bring some healing to these old wounds.
Yeah, we know how to grow ourselves with our partner, or we're being asked to grow ourselves.
Yeah, if we know how to position ourselves well. So part of this is knowing, am I talking to somebody else's brainstem?
Which is that limbic
that
system
part
I was
that
talking
doesn't
about.
think. Yes, it's the part that is reactive. And if you know that that's all they have going at the moment, you may not want to have a long discussion.
Yeah, you can time it for when you're both available. Again, asking good questions, which, let's say you make a statement like, gee, honey, I thought we'd agreed that you would take the trash out tonight, and you didn't do it. And let's say your partner just goes off on you. Oh, you're always nagging me. What the heck? I can never do anything right. If you're on your game, you can say, wow, well, what did you hear me say? And they might say, well, you think I'm a lazy, no good. Okay, that's not what I intended to communicate, though. Would you mind if I restated? I really just was confused that I thought we had this. I don't think that you're a lazy, no good.
Yeah, Nick. I'm sorry I hurt you is true. That it doesn't imply any intent.
So I'm the expert on what I intend. The other person's the expert on what they heard. And when you get a response that doesn't seem to fit with your intention, great time to ask what you heard.
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to respond when they say, well, I heard you say I'm a jerk. Well, how could you think that?
Yeah, right.
What? And now you're saying they're an idiot.
Yeah, they are.
So you really want to regulate and, okay, I got some information, because we never hear each other clearly. I don't care how you say it. This person has a pre-existing filter, and something that you can say that might be completely benign in your view, you're not even thinking anything negative about your partner. They hear it and it touches on something maybe from way long ago when they were growing up, and that's what they're responding to. And rather than you taking it personally, it affects you personally, but you didn't cause them to react, but they did react. And to get curious is to learn more about each other, which is ultimately what we want.
Sometimes just sharing your observations. For instance, I'm aware that I don't speak with my hands near as much as my wife does. My hands are hardly showing. I actually have them, but they're not part of my communication in near the way that that my wife's are and other people. And that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just different, and it doesn't mean I feel less because I'm not gesturing in the same way.
Right.
It's just a curiosity, and when it hits, my smiling about it might not have fit what she was talking about because my brain was doing something else.
Yeah, you're observing
it's just the way it goes.
So communication is about regulating yourself. So what you can do to move forward is to just observe yourself in your work setting versus home. What changes about you, your brain, your respiration, your heart rate, all those things will let you know if you're starting to get reactive. Being curious, sometimes it helps to identify a pattern that has been something you and your partner have talked about a lot and you're just not getting anywhere with it. Getting curious about them, seeing how long you can maintain that curiosity, and when you can't, to be honest and say, okay, well, I kind of need to take a break, which is very, very hard. I would say most people have the hardest time with that because once you get involved in these conversations, you want to keep going for some reason, even though you know they're going south.
Yeah, it's your blood is up.
Yeah. So a good example I'll give you as we close. A client of mine had been very frustrated with her spouse and felt that he was frequently manipulating her to do things, and so she already had this sensitivity. And one night he called. He was running late for work, of coming home from work, and he called to find out. What he asked was, what are the plans for dinner? She got extremely angry with him because you're just manipulating me, trying to get me to cook. I'm tired, and there was a backstory. It wasn't like that just came out of the blue.
Right.
So I asked her, well, let's run this in a different place. Let's say you're at work and a coworker comes up to you and says, what are the plans for this project we're working on? Would you say you're manipulating me? You're always trying to get me to do your work. You blah, 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 blah. No. What's the difference? Well, that's a work. Yeah, there's a different setting, but it's your same brain. How would you respond to that coworker? I asked her, and she says, well, I would, ask her what some of her ideas were, and I said, okay. So let's run the play again. Your husband calls, and he's saying, what are the plans for dinner? What are some responses other than you're always manipulating me and knock it off? And so she came up with, she could say, I don't have any plans. I was just going to eat some cereal, or I don't know, what did you have in mind? Either one of those would have prevented a huge row between the two of them. I'm not blaming her. He has his side. He may very well have been hinting that she cook. so it's not even about that.
Or that she pick up something on the way home.
Right.
Rather than just asking directly.
Yes. But I give that example because it's a common one. We're already predisposed to react to our partners in certain ways. So even when they're not saying a certain thing, if we already have a script in our mind, as soon as they bring up that topic, boom, we're off to the races. So strategizing with your own self can involve, gee, would I have responded this way if I were at work or talking to someone I wasn't related to? And that can let you know, generally, you're going to respond differently at work. And how do you bring that work brain home a little bit more often, because it works better?
So clearly this is a big topic.
It's a big topic.
And this was just one in a series on communication.
So we'll keep going. Hopefully that gets you started. Check out our Relationship University on teachable.com. And you will see courses available to you on different topics. And we get more in depth and actually more teaching. And our Relationship Visions .com is our website.
Relationship Visions Inc. You need to put
That's
in
correct.
the
Inc.
.com.
RelationshipVisionsInc.com is our website, and we have a blog on there. So there's some options for you to continue the process. But if you like this video, please share it with your friends. Share it on Facebook or Twitter, and then subscribe, and we can keep the process going.
Very good.